whatever the panic or anxiety you feel, especially in the city, something about going through a medium like that makes you be here right now. The fertility treatment that they're floating for men is actually like a high testosterone treatment. Because guys that are doing testosterone, basically your testes are like, I don't need to keep producing testosterone.
Yeah.
It actually creates major fertility issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus heart issues and stuff like that. It creates more red blood cells and like much more likely to have a heart attack, stuff like that. But in terms of the materialistic side, so it's like, well, is it causation? Is it like, were they more materialistic and did like their bling because of testosterone? Or are they taking testosterone, which then makes them more materialistic? I don't know, but I can say that testosterone is much more complicated than we think it is. I mean, are we going, by the way?
Yeah.
Oh, we're live. Okay.
Yeah.
I never got that. Usually there's like I lived in LA. It's usually very clear when there's like the clap, and you're going.
Clap.
Like
or
the
natural.
The
Click.
thing. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go.
Now we're live.
A little warning. So one of the big parts about research in general is disentangling causation. So you have correlation and you have causation, right? And like in everyday language, sometimes those two things get mixed up. People say, oh yeah, this causes that. Or this but like the difference between causation and correlation is like the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. They sound the same, they're totally different. In the majority of science, you could talk about let's talk about social science specifically. There's really experimental designs that aren't very good at disentangling cause from effect. Or causation, correlation rather. And so what we came along and we said was all that we learned as graduate students about behavioral endocrinology or even about economics or whether about psychology, whatever it is based on scientific methods that were flawed. And you could say that across many, many fields. Science is an evolving thing, just like everything else. We had a brief discussion about currencies. Yes. And obviously that's evolving and society's evolving. But like what we came around, so we decided we're going to provide an experiment. We're going to set something up that leaves no doubt whether something was caused by testosterone or not. And the way you do that is you look at the medical literature. What do? Randomized controlled trials. Yep. RCT is like the highest standard, the highest bar for disentangling cause from effect. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be sophisticated, but you do have to have some controls in place. Make sure that, nobody in the experiment knows what they're getting, because then you're going to have the placebo effect, which sometimes be, quite powerful. And so the way that we ran the experiment was we said, okay, we're going to tell people that they're getting either testosterone or they're getting placebo, but that nobody knows. So it was double blind to both the people that came in for the experiment and the person that was giving them. So we had an assistant walk in with a tray that had gel in it, and they didn't know. And they said, you're getting one of those two. Either way, be careful. If you have testosterone on you, don't come in physical contact with a female because there's some risk, especially if a female's pregnant. You don't want to give her a shock of testosterone. That's not a good place to be. So that was like kind of the first part of the study, was to figure out, how do we design it in such a way that the results give us some forward movement in terms of learning something about science and about the way people make decisions. So this study produced a variety of different papers. So we did a few different experiments. You're talking about the cognitive reflection one, or
yes, yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy. There's, people know this test. Like you see it even on online tests now, the cognitive reflection task. So a bat and a ball, together costs $1.05. The difference between them is $1, and then you say, how much does a ball cost? That kind of thing. So I don't want to give away the answer. It's kind of fun to like not give away the answers, but like the point of that particular experiment was saying, does testosterone blunt your ability to really think through a problem? So I don't know if you have the paper open right there, but you could look at like the
I have it, cognitive reflection, man. Yeah.
So it's like it's like a pretty famous test, like in like social psychology, and it has like this intuitive answer that you just want to say, and the intuitive answer is the wrong answer. And so we want to say, if we gave you testosterone, how does that affect your cognition? Because it's called a cognitive reflection task. Can I reflect on the answer I'm about to give and then cross-check it with the actual question, make sure I'm giving the right answer? And so it had not been done with testosterone. Like nobody had taken a biological variable and tested it. So we did, and we found that if you gave guys this hormone, essentially this powerful hormone, they would be less capable of reflecting on their answer, and they gave the wrong answer. And it was a large sample size. That the methods are, I would say, bulletproof. Like, there's never been a reviewer that's pushed back, oh, your methods are sketchy. No, like it's solid. In the world of these kinds of experiments, it's a very big experimental sample size.
Yeah.
So it was like I would say a good forward movement on lots of fronts. Like, the methodologically, it was better than other studies had been done. And the finding was unique to say, like, a hormone can actually affect the way you think in kind of this rapid way. And also was incentivized. Like, if you gave the right answer, you got paid for it.
So what does this mean for somebody who's reading this? Like, you always view some studies like, okay, like, what do I do with this data?
Yeah. I think there's like who I had a professor once said, like, if it doesn't pass the who gives a rat's ass test,
That's a good
they
one.
should just like dismiss it.
I like that.
Yeah, it was very funny. Bill, man, good guy. Anyway, so I think that's a fair question. Like, there's science that's interesting and there's science that's relevant.
Yeah.
So this area is called, our field is called neuroeconomics. We're looking at how biological factors affect financial or economic decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
Economic decision-making is a really broad area of human life. Like, it's not just money. Like, this particular one is like, they're kind of like math puzzles, you could say. But there are other studies we did looking at stock trading. There's other puzzles we did looking at people's preferences for status goods, like whether people wanted the Rolex versus the Casio or the Calvin Klein over the Levi's, whatever it is. So we tested kind of different domains of human life and saw, well, how does this hormone affect this specific domain? And the results were really interesting. It was like either we had a really strong result or it was just nothing.
Mm.
And I was shocked because, as a scientist, you want to have huge results. Like, you want to say, yeah, I had a 300% this, or I had a, whatever. Like, because that's the way that science works. You're incentivized to show that your research showed some result. The second part that I'm going to get to in a second of does it matter in a practical quotidian day-to-day sense, like, that's less important in general in academia. Although I think that's changing. I think you're seeing a lot of pushback. You're seeing, behavioral economics specifically thinking of problems that are really important, like poverty, labor laws, all sorts of exotic areas like, prostitution. I know someone that works in the area of like human trafficking and things like that like economics can weigh in a way that's really interesting, really powerful. And so the area that I was focused on is really just biological factors and testosterone. Really wanted to go deep into that. So one of the reasons it's difficult to disentangle cause from effect is that historically there wasn't a drug you could give people. And so what people did historically is they would just like measure, they would take like a blood draw or a saliva, like you just spit in a tube, and they'd go see how much testosterone you had. And they would say, well, Ameer's got a higher level, you're 2 standard deviations higher than most people. Okay, you're a high person. And then your behavior was this. Like, they would have looked at you doing something. But the problem is that testosterone responds to what's happening in your environment.
Oh, yeah. Every hormone.
Yeah, like we're a dynamic thing.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
it fluctuates throughout the day, the readings from morning to afternoon.
Yeah, there's a diurnal cycle. It's highest in the morning.
Yeah.
Because overnight you're converting cholesterol into testosterone. The boys are doing that. And so the experiments themselves sometimes do things like so obviously affect you, not just that your body is likely to produce more testosterone, but psychologically you're a different person because maybe you were challenged. Like, a lot of this they do with, like, say, heterosexual men. They'll expose them to a pretty woman and like see how they behave.
I saw this. I didn't read the actual full study, but I just read the abstract where they had, I think whether it was a picture of a woman or an actual woman, they're doing the bench press. You know that study? And they're able to give up more reps for just a female being there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I don't know that specific one, but like there's ones with like a Confederate, like they call it a Confederate. So like, a research assistant or someone they know who that would seem to be attractive, and they put her in the situation. And so there's one with skateboarding where like they had this like, hot girl at the skate park, and the guys were taking much riskier stuff when they had, so it's a similar thing.
They're peacocking. They have to impress.
Totally peacock. Yeah, you gotta like, and just the absurd of it, like, oh, I'm gonna do a kickflip, I'm gonna take this girl home.
Yeah.
Like, you're
And
probably you're probably not.
fucking idiot.
I know, and she's there like completely aware of it. But it's true. Even when we did our experiment, we had to be careful not to. Actually, all of our experiments, we don't have females research assistants.
Interesting.
Because all of our participants are male.
Smart.
Yeah. And like we learned from people that, if you have an attractive female in your study, like at least have it constant throughout the study. But like there was a researcher who's in this area of research who's like an attractive female, and she was in some of her sessions and not in all of the sessions. And I was sitting there as a graduate student, she's presenting this paper, and she was like showing these spikes in testosterone in some of the sessions and not the others. And I was like, well, you're the confound in your study.
She was a common denominator.
She was only in some, but she was not common. She was in some, but not the others.
Yeah,
and I was like, if as a participant, you notice this very attractive professor, it's going to affect your physiology. It was like completely messing up the thing. She's a very smart person. It's not to diss her work. It was just that these are things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. And now the field's evolved.
Yeah.
So we went from like measuring baseline, like saliva or blood, and then correlating that with that behavior. So going back at the beginning, we talked about correlation, causation, so that I would say, okay, so you're a high testosterone guy. Well, you behave this way. Well, I don't know if for example, your levels change in preparation for this experiment. Like this is fairly well documented in the animal literature that there's the challenge hypothesis, which is exactly what it sounds like. That before you go in for a challenge, your body starts to produce testosterone in preparation. So imagine like a UFC fighter or an athlete. It's a lot of work with like athletes, but it started in the animal literature showing that that animals preparing for a fight would have these surges in testosterone, especially male-to-male combat, like bucks ramming heads or whatever. What's really interesting is that after the conflict was settled, there'd be a winner and a loser. And you found that the winner would have a surge in testosterone and the loser would have a drop in testosterone.
I read about that.
Yeah, okay. So
it's fucked up.
Isn't it crazy?
Poor loser.
I know. Like you got your ass kicked and now you have like a drop in testosterone.
Yeah.
And so there's this whole biological like background to this study of like you see it in the animal literature, you see some evidence of it in the human literature, but like how do we know what's causing what? Like among people, there's lots of variability. There's like variability, seasonality, times of the day. There's like a million things that could vary. So we said, let's just make this very clean. There's a drug that came on the market, I think it was 2001, called androgel. Just a gel, and you just rub it on your skin. It comes through your skin and it increases your testosterone levels. So it was FDA approved 2001. And then we said, well, let's use that. So we'll do a double-blind study, medical grade. We had a psychiatrist on the team. It was like very, ethics approval, like a phlebotomist taking the blood. It was like a medical grade lab study, basically. So we have groups that came in, they got that testosterone gel, and then groups that came in, they got placebo, and we saw how it affected them. We even asked them what they thought they got. Did you think you got testosterone? How sure you are? None of that stuff predicted their behavior, and they were wrong. Like they're all 50-50. Like nobody was able to guess what they got. So it's not like that was a way to confound their behavior. And we tested that in any way that we can. So back to your question about, well, why does this matter in everyday lives? So the saying is, okay, is the drug you gave, is it commensurate with the amount of variability that you would find in testosterone? Like that's the first thing you'd probably wonder. Like, did you shoot people off the charts in terms of testosterone? So when you measure it in blood, that drug only goes up about, when you measure free testosterone, it goes up like 60%.
You guys are measuring in units of picomoles or?
So of one paper that's in blood, one paper that's in saliva. So I'm trying to remember which one.
Yeah.
So when I first got that question, I said, well, the variability that you see in blood from the drug is actually similar to what you see in people's cycles. And I was like, done. I'm done with that question. Like the short answer was yes. This is within what's called physiologic range.
Yeah, the reference ranges. Yeah.
Bingo. And like a few people get shot up to be like super physiologic, fine. And so I thought I was done with that question. And then we did this second experiment where we measured it in saliva. And their levels were way off the charts. So even the FDA, I don't know if FDA is watching, you should pay attention to this. The testing they did before approving the drug was seemingly all the papers were on serum. So you're drawing blood and you're seeing what the levels are.
It's interesting. I work with a lot of, my wife's a naturopath.
Oh, okay.
And we've worked with a bunch of different laboratories. And there's still an ongoing like debate between like hormone testing, like saliva versus blood.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah. And I would imagine the same would be true among other hormones as well. Like actually, it's also true with I think with estrogen you find, or progesterone. I found a similar thing with progesterone. Someone on the team, David Zava, great guy. He runs a lab out of just near Portland, and he's like an incredible scientist that does a lot of testing for like naturopathic schools. I think he's affiliated with NCNM, the one in Portland. Okay. So he knows that world very well, and the guy's like a biology genius, and he's been very helpful on the study. So when you ask, is it realistic? I would say it's probably not. in the sense that the levels were so high that
This is for the saliva.
yeah.
Yeah.
But blood, I thought we're cool. Like it's what we'd find. So, but I want to totally nerd out on this, but it's the levels in your brain that matter, and we can't measure that. So if you take the drug, because you have receptors for testosterone in your brain, but testosterone doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier. So I don't know if you're to take a bunch of gel right now, I don't know what's happening in your brain. We don't have direct evidence of that. So I know we're getting in the weeds methodologically on the hormone stuff, but so in some ways you could say to take something to a bit of an extreme level, you learn something about it. And the results in all the studies that we found were almost binary. It either had a big effect, like this cognitive reflection task. Guys were less able to think through their answers and gave the intuitive incorrect answer significantly more than the guys that got placebo. That's what the facts say.
So was it everybody that got testosterone gave for the test was off, or was it a bell curve, maybe 50-60% of the people on testosterone?
So there are 3 questions, and we measured each question individually.
Okay.
So the bat and the ball question, there was the widgets question, and I'm trying to think of the third off the top of my head here, but so each individually, so you even did a t-test, you would just say the distributions were different. So everybody that got testosterone overwhelmingly gave, on let's say the bat and the ball question, overwhelmingly gave the intuitive incorrect answer. Not some random ass answer. They gave, and again, I'm not giving the answer. It's kind of fun to take the test, and maybe later we could do it. But it's it shifted you to that intuitive space where you're not really thinking at an executive level. You're being more impulsive. You're just reactive.
Reactive as opposed to responsive.
Yeah. And so that's what makes this stuff super interesting, in that if you look at the cognitive reflection test, it's measuring this ability it's essentially blunting your ability to think reflectively about something. However, it's still intact. People that took longer to answer the question, they could still answer the questions, but to give the right answer took them longer to do it. So it's almost like they're aware that they're struggling to think through the question. But it makes sense. The mechanism would make sense. If I was to shock you and put you in the high testosterone state, think of the states in your life where you're in a high testosterone state. And so it could be, like we said, preparing for a fight.
So maybe this puts them this is you're talking about sympathetic versus parasympathetic systems, fight versus flight.
Would
that maybe put them into a fight mode more, as opposed to acutely, but chronically? Because, hormone levels, there has to be homeostatic levels. Even though there's a reference range, it's not like testosterone lives by itself. It's you have a hormone pathway pregnenolone, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA. So it goes pregnenolone, DHEA, testosterone, then estrogen, then all these other derivatives, right? All of them have a symbiotic relationship,
and
right?
some of them are they work against each other. For example, cortisol and testosterone are antagonists.
Yeah, cortisol. Well, there's still debate, but some people would say there's something called cortisol steal, where if you have too much high cortisol, it shunts a lot of your other hormones.
Yeah.
Or it might deviate certain cofactors, which converts to DHEA to testosterone, but the DHEA might end up becoming estrogen as opposed to testosterone.
Yeah, it's pretty nonlinear.
Yeah.
It's it is extremely complicated. We did a panel. We did a full mass spectrometry panel of about 15 hormones. So we would measure whether testosterone just went up or it was it's just a wrecking ball through your system. So we were able to measure that. So we had testosterone, we had DHT, and we had another form of testosterone. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, the one Mark McGuire used. What was over the counter back in the 80s. Nothing against Mark McGuire. Is a big A's fan. I lived in the Bay Area.
It's not Trenbol, is it? No.
No, it's an over the counter. It's an upstream metabolite of testosterone. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but it was over the counter available at the time. But we also measured cortisol, melatonin.
Melatonin too?
Wow. So we did a mass spec. So this is atomic level measurement, extremely accurate. And most of these hormones were everything that was not expected to be associated with testosterone was unchanged. So you think mathematically it was a partial derivative. It just changed that thing without changing any of the other things.
Really?
Yeah, you think it'd be your whole system's gonna be out of whack.
Interesting.
So there is no difference on the other non-testosterone related hormones, even though we gave them the shock of testosterone. So it was like, so that is acute. It's like a one shot.
Yeah.
But chronically, you might expect there'd be some,
And
something
how
of adapt.
frequently were they putting the trend?
We just did one shot.
Oh.
Just like one thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We're trying to make it as realistic as we
They
can.
did a test before testosterone. How long was it afterwards? So I did a test, let's say day 1. When's the next day that I do the test?
So the stock trading experiment I can talk about later if you want. We did that on 2 days. They came in the morning.
Okay.
And then we did like an intake. So, we asked them questions going in. We did a saliva measure in the morning. And then before they left, they rubbed gel on their bodies and they went out and they came back at noon. And then we did the rest of the experiment.
Oh, okay. So within like 48 hours, everything.
It was within 8 hours.
Wow.
Or like from 8 in the morning, they're done by like 4. So it was just one day.
Yeah, you mentioned stocks trading. Why don't we?
That was wild. Oh man. Woo. Yeah. So so because I was at a crazy lab. So the lab's called the Center for Neuroeconomic Studies, and my advisor was
California.
It's in LA. Claremont, California. Yeah.
Cool.
The city. They call it the city of trees and PhDs.
And we're in Toronto, the city of cold weather.
Very cold weather.
Gloomy, no sun.
Yeah. Can we just do the interview there? Is that cool if we just like put a pause and like pick it up in LA?
Yo, scientists, where the fuck is our transporting machine?
I'm a little disappointed. We don't have
Holler, come on. Or Elon Musk, like rocket, like 2 minutes in California. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's Hyperloop Toronto to LA, bro. To the beach, please.
Side tangent before we get into stock market stuff.
Oh,
It boggles my mind that we don't have ground transportation like a Hyperloop yet. Especially here in Canada. We have the second biggest landmass in the world.
Yeah.
And very expensive plane tickets to go across Canada.
Monopolize. It's good for the
monopoly.
airlines.
Yeah, good for them.
But like not a lot of people would ride the Hyperloop, but we should absolutely have a Hyperloop.
Hyperloop.
I mean, just for us.
Yeah.
No, kidding. I mean, I do miss going home, but I think airlines extremely inefficient, and I would like to be
Let's
able
say
to
you have a Hyperloop and there's different Hyperloops. You have
different Hyperloops.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's different versions of Hyperloops. There's ones where they want to build underground, where you have tracks.
Okay.
You have above ground Hyperloops or prefabs. Think like Lego pieces.
Yeah.
Simple physics, magnetism, right? Negative versus positive type idea.
Yeah. Like a maglev kind of situation.
Yeah. Think like monorail Japan type idea, but in a tube. So there's literally a tube with magnets, zoom, zoom, right?
Wow.
You have Hyperloop stuff where it's what's the technical term? Aeronomics? No, I'm butchering, but it uses air pressure to go through.
Oh yeah, pneumatics.
Pneumatics. That's
Silent
right.
P.
Yeah, pneumatics. Yeah,
Silent
exactly.
P. Yeah.
It's way cheaper than flying,
Mm-hmm.
less security than flying,
Hope so. Yeah.
and also easier than going to a fucking airport.
Yeah.
Especially the above ground,
Mm-hmm.
because it's prefabbed. You don't have to really build anything. It's just on platforms and you put them together.
I feel like there should be like a sponsored, like we should have like Hyperloop. Like so, there's Virgin and there's Elon, right? Like there's Richard Branson.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's even like in the crypto space, there's a company doing like software called R-Loop. You can look up what they're doing afterwards.
Really?
Yeah.
Related transportation.
Related transportation.
Well, what are we waiting for?
Yeah.
Because we should go surfing after this.
Let's
Taking
do it.
Hyperloop.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
It's still light, I think, in LA.
It's 3 hours. Yeah.
We could do it.
All right. So
Okay.
stock market.
Okay, so similar question that we had was like, okay, there seems to be this like macho culture in finance.
Mm-hmm.
It's male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the guys moving billions of dollars a day are guys. So is there a biological factor? Why is it that they act in that particular way? Is there a particular factor that we could manipulate and change their behavior?
Mm.
And so if you stand back and say, okay, well, of the variables that I can manipulate, which ones are candidates? Genes, I can't manipulate. I can't manipulate gender, not in this like experimental setting.
Yep.
I don't, in the toolbox of neuroscience or behavioral endocrinology, like of neuroeconomics broadly stated, you're not going to do. I mean, there's also, I guess you could do a TMS, like you could block a certain part of the brain, do like a little subtle kind of impedance of the prefrontal cortex or whatever, like from in your causal toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking, well, okay, what's something that fluctuates a lot and seems to be deterministic or powerful or potent? Like testosterone was like the obvious answer. I mean, related to our earlier conversation about the winner effect, the challenge hypothesis, huge animal literature about it. It just seemed like the candidate hormone. And we had done other studies at the lab before that using cortisol. We had used we used one with naltrexone, which for those at home, that's for like alcoholics and heroin addicts to get off of it. What it does is it blocks the dopamine pathways in your brain. And we somehow got ethics approval to use that, which I'm a bit surprised. I mean, a small proportion of people will like permanently be damaged by it.
Really?
Like a very small proportion.
Is it similar to like methadone?
I don't know how similar they are.
Okay.
But no, this is like, it's just so you don't get a kick out of doing something that's bad for you.
Yeah.
So it's probably a similar mechanism, I suppose. It's like a blocker.
Yeah, it blocks the neurons from. Yeah.
So you just don't feel good about it. It's like, people that suck their thumb, this is like gross. I never suck my thumb for the record, but I'd imagine this just makes it not pleasurable to go have a drink or do whatever. So we had like a bit of a precedent at the lab of doing things that were edgy or were difficult, that were hard to pass, but safe. Like for all intents and purposes, they were safe. And then naltrexone was safe. So the lab I was really proud to say it was like the pioneering lab in neuroeconomics, and worked with some really interesting people. So it was time for me to come up with my dissertation chapter. And as I said, testosterone seemed like the right candidate. And it had not been done in this context, but we had the resources and had the money to do it. It's pretty expensive to put this stuff off, by the way. You have to pay people really well. You do the blood draws. You got to buy the drugs.
Yeah, people don't understand. Studies are fucking expensive.
Yeah.
Very expensive.
Oh, yeah. The doses of drugs, it was, we bought it retail at a pharmacy.
Yeah.
Like through it was, and we paid people well, between $60 and $120 a person. And they'd buy the drugs, pay the phlebotomy. It was probably all in. It was well over $100,000, maybe $200,000. If you count the man hours, it's even higher than that. We're all graduate students, slaves, so it was basically free. But so a lot went into it, and so what we did, we said, okay, well, let's create a stock market that is real in the sense that people are trading stocks in real time with each other, and let's see if the people that get testosterone, or those markets where guys are at high levels of testosterone, will those markets transact at different prices than markets where guys are trading at their normal levels. Again, double-blind, randomized controlled trial, you don't know. So what we did was everybody was in the same group, got the same thing. Because it's cleaner that way. It's really cleaner to disentangle cause from effect if everybody's on the same thing. So we ran a bunch of sessions. We piloted a bunch of times. And then I'll talk for a second about the paradigm. We're not logging people into E-Trade accounts. Like, that's way too complicated. What we did was we used a paradigm. It's just called double auction markets, which was pioneered by Vernon Smith. He's like considered one of the major pioneers in experimental economics, considered like the father of experimental economics.
Dutch auction?
What's that?
Dutch?
No, this is like trading in real time. So, there are Dutch auctions in experimental economics. Like Charlie Holt, for example, works in that space. So Vernon Smith, again, he's a very bright guy. He's like 90-something, 92, 93. The guy's amazing, very, very sharp. And he founded this field, and he won the Nobel Prize along with the same year as Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky, who won it posthumously. They won it the same year. What's interesting, I've worked on their topics now, and Vernon Smith funded the project. So it was really cool to have a Nobel laureate who's like very well respected support the project, and he gave us a good amount of money to be able to pull it off.
Awesome.
So the way he does it, he says, okay, well, instead of a real stock market, it's real, but in the sense of a stock, which is, there's so much stuff going on in the real world. There's, the Fed could change, change the rate. It could be a presidential election, a bomb, earnings, whatever. Let's just create an asset that everybody knows what it's worth. And so there's no real question about the fundamental value, and let people trade on maybe thoughts or emotions or whatever it is that would drive their beliefs about the price. But we're all in the same session and we all know what it's worth. So you'd walk in, Ameer, you're welcome. Here is the fundamental value chart for this trading period. And so you'll be trading with a bunch of other guys and buy and sell for whatever the hell you want. So that's the experiment. And what we found was the guys that came in that got testosterone, they immediately started bidding up the prices, like double, triple, quadruple the price. And I'm standing there. I proctored all of them in my lab coat. And I can see in the side screen like what's going on. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And then we'd have a session. Then a week later we'd have a session with all placebo, and these guys are trading. So like the fundamental value drops like this. So they're trying to buy below and sell above. In the placebo sessions, I'm watching it real time. I can't believe this is happening. I was like, I'll wait till the data are all in. I don't want to get too excited about it. But I got the data set, and I was like, it's like that kind of almost fell out of my chair, like, holy shit, this hormone actually drives these price bubbles like to the sky. And then almost at the very end of the trading sessions, because they know that it's finite, it's like 12 periods, they're like, oh crap, nobody's buying anymore. I can't resell this thing. And they would collapse, all of them. So it was like this, is like feeling like I now found a variable that can manipulate markets, at least in this little sense.
Yeah.
It was huge. It was like, it literally changed the course of my life.
Wow.
To see that you change one variable in a double-blind study and you can affect a financial market.
So I wonder what hedge funds are thinking. Like, oh shit, how do we use this?
You know what's crazy? This was nuts. So we did this 2013.
Yeah.
An article came out in the Financial Times like right around the same time, showing there's a physician in New York who prescribes the exact same drug to guys on Wall Street.
Really?
Like androgel.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, I prescribe it. I mean, you could look it up. I think Lionel Bassoon, I think is his name. I've not met him personally. I don't comment on him as a person. I just know he's featured in a Financial Times article. And I'm thinking, holy shit. Do you know that I just showed in a scientific way that the drug you're giving to guys who are actually moving hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, like this is what it does to them.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't know that. These guys are taking the drug off label, meaning a use other than what it was prescribed for. So that kicked up a whole bunch of attention. I was interviewed by like NPR and a bunch of other media outlets. Like, what the hell is going on here? So when you talk about why this matters, I didn't really complete my thought, but it's better to come back to it now and say it matters because the drug we use in the experiment to model changes that would happen in your body anyway are actually being used in the real environment by people who are doing the actual behavior that matters, that affects the world and affects the world economy. So we talked about cognitive reflection. I just talked about trading. There are other things as well that we show that affects. So I was actually surprised pleasantly that it's actually more realistic than just like a silly lab experiment. It's like the reverse. It's like we're simulating the real world and not even knowing we're simulating the real world.
I have two questions on this.
Yes.
Number one, we touched briefly, for example, with the example of whether it's two deers or two mooses fighting.
Yeah.
Winner testosterone goes up, the loser. Well,
yeah.
It is what it is. That's nature.
Yeah.
There's no mercy in nature.
Right.
It's genes are surviving.
Mm-hmm.
Humans, a little bit different, but not too different.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have evolutionary biology,
mm-hmm.
which is dictated by our environment. And then we have evolutionary psychology. They're all together.
Mm-hmm.
Is there some hypothesis of why we think they would behave that way based on evolutionary biology or psychology? Why would they start bidding? Like if we look at let's say we're a scientist of pure observation
Mm-hmm.
and we just look at hunters and gatherers
and
how tribes grew up and we just sit there and just look at them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's some type of knowledge that we can gain? Is there some comparison there?
If we were to observe like free roaming people
Sure.
versus the lab, well, I mean, that's what motivated the question. It's like we observe free roaming people and we don't know why the hell they do certain things. And so we take the world and simplify it and then manipulate one variable so we can make some claim about the effect of that one variable. Because if we have too many, it becomes too ambiguous. We don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
But this really tries to get at the questions you're asking of like evolutionarily, why would testosterone do these manifold things? Why would it affect the way you think? Why would it make you more impulsive? So let's go back to the fighting thing.
Yes.
If you think about being at an elevated testosterone level and it's making you more impulsive, in some situations, that's actually a good thing. Like if you're trading in a rapid environment and you think too much, you may not do as well. If you're an athlete and imagine playing a sport requires tremendous speed and you're thinking too much of it, like thinking of it like procedural memory, that's not going to serve you. If you're in a life-threatening situation and you need to act quickly, that may actually be the best outcome, whether it's good for the other person or not.
Yep.
So encouraging this like rapid deployment of resources without thinking too much about it is actually an evolutionary movement towards making you more likely to survive and to propagate it as a specific genetic makeup. And so what's really interesting, it's not just in a violent sense. It's not just in a thinking sense. Like we have another paper that you mentioned really early on was on preferences for status goods.
Yeah. The bling bling.
Totally. Like, I mean, I would admit, I thought this was a long shot. I was
Yeah.
like, you guys, like, I know there's a theory about it, but like,
Yeah.
I mean, but to choose something like an Audi over a Ford or
Yeah.
like a, whatever, it just, my pride was like, well, we'll see. I don't care. I don't have a dog in this fight, but like the short answer is that we saw that people had a preference for the higher status brands.
It's crazy.
Like extremely strong, robust, no matter how you slice the data, it's pretty.
So it was like a survey, like, so before treatment, here's a survey. After treatment, here's a survey.
We did some baseline stuff before treatment. We also did validation outside of this, like a even bigger validation of seeing what do people think about these brands.
Gotcha.
Like, okay, I think that Calvin Klein is a higher status than Levi's. They're probably very similar quality.
The natural perception of that brand.
Yeah, so we tested that with a totally different sample, like 600 people.
Yeah.
And then we said, in this experiment, how would you rate these brands? And then there's another question of looking at the advertisements. And we only changed, so we'd have the same image, like say, a fancy watch, and we only changed the way that it was written. So one was drawing out the power aspect, like some really powerful watch for, pilots, things like that. And this other one was, this is extremely high quality, well-made, Swiss, da-da-da-da-da. And the other one was like, when you wear this, people know that you're the man, or people know that you're high status. I say man because they're all men in the study. We can't give them the drug. And so we found that on those two dimensions, one is the ad. They rated the ads that was identical visually, except for those few words about status. They chose that as a higher one. Like that was a huge preference for that particular one. And also among the brands, we'd have a continuum. We'd have on one end the similar quality, lower status to similar quality, higher status. And we just saw that people would just choose the higher status one.
Interesting.
And so we tested it in a couple of different ways, and it was like, wow. So in terms of survival, there's like a very deep literature in animal literature about survival, about how status signals your biological fitness.
Oh yeah.
And so that too is based like in a famous theory, almost what's his last name? Anyway, blanking out. Israeli researcher talking about how animals signal this stuff, and how humans, we seem to be, we're in the lineage. And so this particular hormone made people more choose something that would signal to others that I am a higher status than this other person.
Yeah, that's why I always like to relate things to like evolutionary biology.
It's all in that. So we're taking an ancient hormone, taking a modern dude, tweaking just that, and seeing how would you behave in a financial situation, in a thinking situation, in a consumer situation, just to see like, does this matter?
I always tell people we're just highly more evolved chimps. And for me, I've had Dr. Christopher DiCarlo on here. He talks about like free will and critical thinking.
Yep.
Really cool guy. He's going to be on actually this week again. And, we're talking about free will, how free will doesn't really exist. We're more predetermined on the evolutionary lineage that we had. Obviously, it's not saying that free will is binary. It's not like yes or no. There's a there's like a bell curve, right? So you behave in a certain spectrum. It's not like if you look at the history of your life, you behave in a certain spectrum. It's not like you deviated from like 1 to 20. Like there's a natural type of behavior pattern that you have. Why do you behave that way? Well, genetics plays a role, hormones plays a role, lineage of your ancestry plays a role, the environment that you live in. All this plays a role, right? And so it's interesting to see how we're surrounded by all these environmental factors, right? You talk about the stock market, the phone, social media, but yet we're still Paleolithic apes, emotionally speaking, hormonally speaking.
Yeah.
And it's for me, it's like, that's why I like, behavioral economics is very fascinating. It's like, and so anything that I view, it's when people say like, oh, I never understood why that person behaved that way. I'm like, you're not asking the right questions. That's a wrong question, why the person's behaving that way. The right question, what are the factors making that person behave that way? It's not about how you like that person to behave a certain way. There's a reason why that individual behaves that way.
There is internal consistency to those people.
Yeah.
To an external observer might seem irrational or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, the bottom line is we are not optimized for the world that we live in.
No.
Whether it's our tribe size or our environment. We're living, in Toronto, most of us can afford apartments at this point, and to be isolated. Maybe, right?
Fuck, Toronto's getting crazy, man.
I know. Can I slip here? Is that cool? Can I just move into the studio?
We're like a new York coming up over here.
I know, man. Yeah, I got to be a crypto billionaire to have a place. But yeah, I mean, there's always some internal consistency with like even wild behavior. Like
Yeah.
if you look at like, you know, whether people are having a psychotic episode, like, well, to them, that's something that's going on. I mean, we're not talking about such extreme situations. And to answer that super complicated, loaded question, the way we addressed it was like, what are behaviors that we care about? So like, we're not going to talk about, you know, whether somebody was rude to the waitress. We'll do things that we can measure. I mean, there are people who probably measure that. We're saying, okay, let's take something quantifiable, such as bidding for a stock or choosing a specific product or answering a question.
But there's, sorry to interject, but there's that stock study is a beneficial study for hedge funds or other institutions, because it may not be a study where they can directly apply a strategy, but it adds more to data points within their pre-existing strategy. Like, you know, hedge funds, they have different baskets, whether it's like, might be daily high frequency trading, might be like medium holds, long holds, different baskets. You move around the baskets, you're arbitraging. That's it at the end of the day. Making spreads, arbitraging. Okay. Then you have different other types of investors. You might be kind of like Warren Buffett investors, where it's like, you know, value investing, the long hold, right? Then you might have crazy investors, like, let's invest in a startup. You're fucking lunatic.
Don't you work with startups, man?
Or something like that. You know, I was like, I'm going to get my asymmetrical return, you know, 100x return.
Yeah. The lottery ticket.
Yeah, pretty much. But the stock market's interesting because it's an amalgamation of so many psychological pressures. Testosterone, as you mentioned, plays a big role. But lately I've been digging in a lot to René Girard, like mimetic theories. And it goes to biology. Like, we have something called mirror neurons. This is how babies learn very well. Like, they're a little baby and how you express yourself. And this is how they can learn language is easy. It's monkey see, monkey do. You know, it's in us, mirror neurons.
Yeah.
So like mimetic theory pretty much is monkey see, monkey do. The way you behave, I shall behave that way as well. And so you have the stock market and you have all these people, high testosterone alpha, and I'm bidding, and you see me, you want to outcompete me. We're $2. We're going at it. And so you're trying to outbid me. But even people not at our level of, like, say, alpha status, whatever you want to call it, through mimetic theory, they start behaving like us through osmosis. It isn't like I study you. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to do what he does. No. This is subconscious. Just because I'm around you, I'm picking up your kind of...
Well, we call that hurt. I mean, behavioral finance,
Hurt.
It's just hurting behavior.
Yeah.
People dismiss their own internal signals and say, well, this is doing this and this is doing that. And nowadays, people can do that in a very overt way of making people do that through tweets and through whatever.
I'll give you an example in Canada. It's like, I'm not hating on anybody, but I remember in this is actually applies to crypto too. Weed and crypto, same thing. I remember people telling me, have I invested in any weed stocks? I'm like, have you seen them? Like, have you actually done your due
diligence on the negative earnings? Yeah.
Or like even like the market size of Canada, like 35 million people. Out of 35 million people, how many are actually using? You know what I mean? It's like a tiny little dinky market.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm not really my cup of tea. That doesn't mean, you know, a lot of people made a lot of money, but you can see it. Like, even with crypto, with the ICO boom, like, everyone's just throwing money in. People asking me about tokens. I'm like, have you done your due diligence? Like, and then people get caught up in this.
Well, there's no answer.
Yeah.
I mean, you could have invested in an ICO early and you could be a multi-millionaire right now. I mean, when you start talking about behavioral finance, like, just like any other area of science, is like you try to break it down in pieces you can understand. So hurting is like a phenomenon that's measured. That's like people do their best to measure. They both try to do it both in empirical data sets and also in experiments. Where they say, like, they call it information cascades. Like, for example, they'll have somebody where they have like some signal about what something's worth. So like, we're talking about what weed is worth or what crypto is worth. Well, they're given a signal and then they see other people give a signal, and you see where people like dismiss their signal and go with the crowd. Like, so they're really trying to get at the mechanism of what causes this whole information cascade where they just start to dismiss what they know is true and go for that. And so you talk about different investment styles. I mean, Buffett is unique in some ways. And value investors, they're kind of like a cult. I worked with George Athanasakos at Ivey for a number of years on this project, looking at the different personality types that invest in certain ways. And so we're working on this for some time to see, are value investors really that different from, say, a day trader? And so we're in the process of collecting data, ascertaining different personality types. If I could, I'd have a big lab and test their hormone levels. But the market is composed of all of those people. And then there's also institutional factors. A day trader, nothing's constraining you from buying or selling your amount of money. But institutions like mutual funds or say, hedge funds or pension funds, they move at like this glacial pace in massive quantities.
Yes.
And when you're trying to follow what people are doing, like it's very, very difficult. I mean, it's mind-boggling. So what I find when you're trying to really study something, that it's a bit maybe unsatisfying at the end, because by trying to understand something, you must isolate to have any firm statement about it. And by doing so, you have had to sort of blind yourself to the rest of the complexity of it. It's just like the Matrix, like where if you see the whole thing, in the movie, they say, well, you just want to understand, you have to see it encoded. And so it's funny, saw the Matrix when it came out. And then as a graduate student, I was looking at a matrix of data. It's like I am living in that world where you can't understand the complexity. What you just said in that earlier sort of paragraph, like spans 100 careers of scientists that would never really be able to fully answer the questions in multiple fields, evolutionary biology, finance. I could spend the rest of my career trying to understand one of those questions.
Yeah.
And maybe with changes in technology, maybe with changes with blockchain or something, it would give me a handle on it. But man, it's really frustrating because in a poetic sense, you can express yourself, you can toss up these questions, but when you actually get down to the work of doing the science, the question becomes much more provincial, much more circumscribed than the initial excitement that drove you to the question.
Yeah.
So it's not to like discourage any budding economists or scientists, but like that's just the truth about trying to make a hard statement.
Well,
in a scientific way.
Talib talks about, like, for example, black swan events. It's like you can create projections and you can create the frameworks all you want, but there's certain things that you can never expect.
Well, there's Didier Sornet who says he disagrees with him.
Okay.
So I found this very interesting. So he's a scientist. He's like comes from like, I'm trying to think his like native field, but he's now in finance, and he takes the opposite perspective of Taleb. He says, yes, there are black swan events, but let's just for a second talk about what we mean by black swan. Black swan event is like something that's from a normal distribution perspective unlikely to happen.
Yes.
So like let's say the 6 sigma event. So the standard deviation is 1, then something it hits here over at whatever the mean plus 6. So that should statistically never happen. But there's a problem in that very characterization, which is that financial markets follow normal distribution. So I'm going to nerd out on this for a second. It's important because if we think the normal distribution is a fair model of returns, well, then you're going to have fairly flat tails. You have small tails. But like if you use a power law distribution or some other distribution has really fat tails, well, then something that happens really far from the mean is not that unlikely. So point one. The second part of that is when something like a major crash happens, it happens when it's least likely statistically. So time has gone on, and as time is going on and there's been no volatility, this normal distribution of like, let's say a moving average or whatever of 60 days or whatever is shrinking. And so at that point, you're getting more confident that, yeah, I can actually take this bet and talk about that whole macho confidence. Oh yeah, I got this. Well, in that moment, you're just waiting for that crash to happen. So those are 2 points to think about when we toss around words like black swans is that maybe the distribution's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's the most wrong before the crash.
Yes.
So when you talk about risk management from a hedge fund perspective or from any financial perspective, you got to think about that. And so Sornet makes the point that if you look at like they're testing materials, like let's say you're working on like a container that holds water or a rocket ship. A rocket's actually something he studied, and he would say, yeah, they would blow up suddenly, but it wasn't. But if you actually look at it, the material would start to rattle, and then you'd say, oh,
there's early telltale
yeah,
signs.
there's something coming. And
well,
so,
even like the 2008 financial collapse,
right.
It's not like
the Big Short, right? If you're watching and you not
even
you saw
now,
the rattle,
even now, I'm seeing something happening, and I'm not like a economist or like a genius by any means. I'm just a regular fucking dude that looks at like basic patterns. It's like
but you're seeing something anomalous. You're seeing a pattern. So what pattern do you see that seems that's
I
like
just look at
triggering
like
your
basic
attention?
math. It's like negative yield. Interest rates can't go higher. nonstop quantitative easing. You know, they want to introduce some MMT theory in the United States. For
That's
me,
popular,
it's
yeah.
like,
So
I don't see
So
this.
continue,
I don't see this
continue.
going very well.
So you think they'd be like what? Like hyperinflation? Fiat losing its-
Hyperinflation, it might be student debt crisis that happens, 1.5 or 1.4 trillion dollars owed in student debt. You can't claim bankruptcy, both Canada and the United States, which is pretty fucked up. There's no system in place to kind of fix that or even create some type of better, let's say, secondary solution in case that does happen. You know, the problem with a lot of these like financial system, there's never second order thinking. It's like, well, we're going to do this one thing, but they don't think the butterfly effect. It's like, what does this one thing do? Like, think about, for example, the real estate market. We're talking about Toronto. They literally can't raise the interest rate 1%. The cause of collapse. Because people, their spread's so thin, right?
Yeah.
Average saving $400. They even had to loosen up the stress test here in Canada because people couldn't get mortgages. So now that's kind of loosened up. Most people are going outside of Toronto, or most people who are buying underneath $1 million, which put 5% because that's what they can afford. Now they got to get mortgage insurance because they only put 5%. And so at the end of the day,
It's really brittle.
It's brutal. They're in the red.
Yeah.
They actually owe money every month. They're not even saving anything. Forget the $400.
Yeah.
You're owing money every month.
Yeah.
And this is our interest rates of what? What did the Canadian bank put it, like 2? I don't know. I mean, it's like fucking ridiculous.
You can get a mortgage for like 2.6.
It's fucking free.
Basically. Yeah.
It's free. And then
So you think you think something's going to come and push that over?
Yeah.
But you don't know what it is.
Maybe the student debt crisis, maybe more trade war, maybe we have a Cold War with China happening now, stuff going on with Hong Kong. You see a lot of unrest these days. You see stuff happening in Bolivia right now. You see stuff happening in Chile right now, Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela. All of Latin America is going up in arms.
Middle
right
East
now.
is never like super chill, just generally speaking, like at the moment.
At
it's
the
not
moment, yeah.
particularly
So
chill,
it's
yeah.
like, but it seems like everything at the exact same time is kind of like a boiling pot happening. And for me, it's like, call me old fashioned, but when you have the middle class getting squeezed and everyone, their debt ratio is ridiculous, and you have an average saving of $400 and Canadian GDP is not going very well.
The math just means that eventually there's going to be something has to
Eventually
correct.
we have
Something's
high
gotta
debt and you don't have cash flow coming in to pay that debt.
It's not like it'll be just a small thing. Like the thing will unwind because
Yeah.
you have this hurting and you have this momentum effect. I think a lot of people are thinking about that, and I think that this whole MMT, this
It
idea
makes no
that,
sense to me, this MMT theory.
Should we explain it? Should we go into that?
Yeah, you can explain
I
it.
don't
So
know.
like in a nutshell, it's modern
Monetary.
monetary theory.
Yep.
And basically doesn't have to be pegged to anything. Forget the gold standard, forget even 1 to 10 reserves, fractional reserves. As long as the government owns money, they can print as much as this takes quantitative easing and puts it on steroids.
Totally.
Unlimited printing.
Steroids like testosterone.
Exactly.
Exactly. I'm with it, yeah.
So it's like, oh, we need another $500 billion.
It is really a push of a button.
Yes.
And then they say that, so the justification is that we could use that money by going paving roads in Arkansas.
Yeah.
Or like doing something that's economically meaningful, and that there's no comeuppance, essentially.
It's
like
crazy.
a drug. It's like you could be high the rest of your life and there's no coming down from it. I mean, yeah, call me old fashioned too, but I think that there is a fundamental reality that there has to be some sort of balancing of the books. And it kind of gets into a deeper concept about economic theory. And there was a statement, I think it was Robert Solow, who said that macroeconomic training is both very expensive and very wasteful. Something to that extent. This was a few years ago. And as someone who went through the torture of macroeconomic training, to do ISLM and all the derivations of the equations and all that, it was very difficult. And to pass your qualifying exams and get the PhD is it's a vetting process. They murder most of us on the way. And you feel so proud that when you finish that I now have this model and I now understand mathematics, I understand the world. Well, I find that it gave me kind of a false confidence that I maybe should not have had about how the world actually works. And I know this is unpopular to say, someone who's trained neoclassically, but I'm a big fan of data and I'm a big fan of facts. And there was not one regression, not one piece of data analysis done in my macro class. Now, that same class does have, it's all actually, I was just talking to a professor the other day, it's all done in R Markdown. So it's all pulling real data, real time, testing it. It's actually beautiful. So we shouldn't be hopeless about it. I think there's that this data revolution that we're having is actually going to make us better scientists and will help us understand these kinds of things, because now it's all going to be monitored. And if you see collapse, there might be ways to head it off rather than seeing everything unwind. Well, there may be something
I don't know
that
who's
could
leading
improve.
the Fed or what's doing, like from the 2008 bailouts to the bank is ridiculous. Like even like the stock markets we're talking about, literally they're getting free money, buying back their own stocks almost at zero interest, right? It's not even capitalism anymore. It's not even cronyism. It's like IMF, central bank, Wall Street cronyism. I can't even compete if I want. You know, earlier you and I were talking about China. It's like, how do you compete against a Chinese company that has unlimited funding from the government that doesn't care about profit? You don't. That's a reality.
Yeah.
You just can't compete. They have a black hole of money from the government. They don't care. They'll operate at a loss forever. So for me, it's like, I'm not even viewing this as an investor. I'm viewing it as majority of the people just want to have a better quality of life. And a lot of the problems that we have today, especially now in our political environment, is talking about, let's say, automation or, oh, it's the rich people's fault or blah, blah, blah. It's, yeah, it's for votes. Everyone's, you know, blaming fingers. For me, I view as, one, obviously there's always an educational problem. Education has to adapt. That applies for everybody. But if we're talking about finances, if we're talking about the economy, if I'm talking about, for example, like real case studies, like my mom, right, or my brother, regardless of if my mom makes $60K or $80K a year, her buying power decreases every year, and it decreases a lot. It's not like simply 2%. 2% is just inflation, right? You get all this quantitative easing and interest rates. Next thing you know, it's like fucking 7% maybe per year. So it's like, how is a person supposed to live? So if you look at the buying power, it's lost 70% since the 80s. The same dollar you had in 80 is worth 70% less today. And so where does this go? You see the trend line. It goes to zero. This is why I'm not too big of a favor of all these government handouts. I'm not against the government, saying fuck the government. I'm against the monetary system that we have. It doesn't help regular people. And so it's like, how do we increase buying power? How do we increase, literally it's the buying power. If a person has more buying power, it helps the whole fucking economy. More people buy real estate, more people will invest, more people will spend. But that's not the case, as we know. In North America, Canada, within North America, it's $400 savings.
Average. There's a lot of people in savings also.
Saving, average, 400. Think about $400.
That's a slim margin.
You know, thank God we're in Canada. We have socialist healthcare system, not the best, but I get a broken arm, I can go ER. Like ER is good. When it comes to socialist system, ER is good.
Yeah.
Anything else, not good. I give credit for ER, like emergency related, like acute, like right now, I need to do it. Good. But preventative stuff or like, I remember I had some like pains and I need to go see what's the doctor called for like the liver and everything? Urologist? Nephrologist.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not life-threatening. It's not an issue. It's like 8-month wait. I'm going to get the fuck.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, they got to mete out like resources to like the most urgent things. It's pretty like calculating. I have some buddies that are doctors, and the amount of waste that's happening in the system. I mean, I'm amazed when they tell me, well, so who comes and sees you? And I have a buddy, he's like, 80% of the people are just there because they're bored and it's free.
Really?
Yeah. And one of the communities near here, I was like,
bored.
as an American, I've driven myself to the hospital, I think 3 times with like fractures, like bike wreck. I mean, multiple things like, and I appreciate healthcare so much that I don't ever use it unless I have to. Even I still think like, well, I want to conserve it for the people who actually need it. And I talk to my friends who are physicians, and the things they tell me, I'm just like appalled. And so not taking a political position on it, but I just think in terms of like caring about, if we're going to really care about the society.
We have a broken healthcare system.
We're actually ranked the whole picture.
We're ranked pretty low when it comes to healthcare.
In what domain? I'm fairly new in Canada, so what is it like the quality of it? Is it
it's the quality.
How it's distributed?
Quality and time waiting for something.
Who's good in the realm of social? Isn't the UK good? Or?
France, actually.
France is good.
They have a 2-tier system. They have socialist and private. So that's one of the trends in Canada, trying to people to push is more private.
Was it Mayo? Isn't there a Mayo clinic here now that you could do
Yeah,
private?
listen, there's private, but it's not how you think it is. It's not
It's like pay for play.
It is, but it isn't. So there is a spectrum of what's allowed in private. Right? There's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to the United States is like whatever the fuck you want to do. Whatever you want to do.
Basically.
There's very strict laws of what is allowed privately in Canada. I mean, really, really strict.
Huh.
And so if we want to make a much better, and listen, dirty politics comes into play, bloated bureaucracy comes into play. Like there's a lot of factors for this. Sunk cost bias, incentive models. People don't want to lose their position, obviously. You know, Nassim Taleb has a saying, like the two biggest addictions is heroin and a fucking salary. So they got their, fat ass salary. They don't want to lose their position.
Yeah.
It's like you're trying to kill like a virus or something. So ideally, I like to model everything in nature. Mm-hmm. Like nature's the best scientist. Mm-hmm. She's been here for 6 billion years.
Quite some time.
Yeah.
Like on Earth, but
exactly, right? Mother Gaia, let's say.
Yeah.
And nature's about competition. Mm-hmm. And it's about conserving energy, right? And if we look at systems today, I'm a big believer in game theoretical models. And so if we only have one model, there's no competition. There's no incentive to improve anything whatsoever. And so for me, it's like, why don't we have a two-tier system? Let's have private. And obviously if private's going to be expensive, I'm not here telling you private's not going to be expensive. Of course it's going to be fucking expensive. And people that want to pay will pay. It's two parties are consenting to a transaction. Most Canadians that are looking for an fMRI or a nephrologist that I had to do, or some form of a non-emergency, let's say, test, they'll go to Buffalo. You pay out of pocket, you get your results in 24 hours. Walk in, literally. It's like, how much? I don't know, a couple $100 for whatever it is, right? But imagine you had that here. You would create a more streamlined competition. And I see now there's even fMRIs. So somebody just created one for like new fMRI machine for $400,000.
That's like less than half.
I just saw it. Yeah,
that's cheap. That trend, the trend of lower imaging technology. I used to work in healthcare, and the invention in dentistry was they had 3D volumetric tomography machines you could get in office for like $250,000. Now they're less, but replacing basically a high radiation CAT scanner. And so a doctor could lease or buy this thing that would give you like 1/1000th of the radiation of a CAT scanner. And now it's available to the public. So technology, I mean, to kind of bring it back in, like technology is the great disruptor and the great equalizer. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about nature, like there are people kind of on the fringes thinking about things, and those, whether it's the innovator thought, I'm going to create this X-ray machine, whether it's the fMRI machine that's cheaper or the X-ray machine that's much lower radiation in terms of microsieverts and cost, like that innovation is that competition you're talking about. In crypto is that competition you're talking about. Like all the things that you're talking about kind of rope all back in.
DNA sequencing was like $10,000 when it first came out, roughly.
Now it's 23 to do like a full gene one.
Well, they don't do full gene.
Yeah, they do just like simple stuff.
Still, it's cheap. What is it, like $199?
Yeah, I don't know. Haven't done it.
I haven't done it yet.
Should we? Just maybe we're related. My dad's from Romania. Where are you from?
Former Yugoslavia.
Okay, probably not, but
yeah. I'm wary of doing it.
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable about it too.
I listened to one of my favorite podcasts lately is Hidden Forces. Mm-hmm. And let me pull up the last one right now. I'll send it to you afterwards. The latest episode was with Kyle Bass. Uh-huh. And he was talking about the Chinese companies that do, and he mentioned 23andMe, that do majority of the gene sequencing for all these companies. And
they offshore it to China?
And they have all the data.
Oh, that's comforting.
Yeah, exactly.
He mentioned that publicly?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And so for me, I'm like, and I still haven't done it. And I literally just listened to this episode. So if you guys are wondering, go check out Hidden Forces podcast.
I'm feeling you're never going to do it now. You could go to like a private lab, but
there's one in BC. So if I know for a fact the BC lab, I forget the name of it, but if they're fucking doing it, if they have the machinery there, I'll do it there.
Yeah.
That's no problem. And it won't be under my fucking legal name either. It'll be John Doe. And I'll pay cash. Like, I don't want my name attached to that.
You're really into outpatient services, I see.
Yeah. I like privacy.
Yeah.
Like, my goal in the future, like another way to make healthcare better is to have more interoperability of healthcare. Like, even as an Ontario resident, it's very difficult for me to take, almost impossible to take my medical documentations from the Ontario government and to go to BC. It's very hard. Very, very hard. And so this is why, in fact, a lot of times why there is malpractice in medicine, well, in Canada per se, is there's a dissonance between communication between practitioners in different places. So like you go to one place or hospital, they have this data on you, but that data isn't shared over here. It's like the example of the United States, like CIA, FBI, you have all these different like agents, but no one fucking shares data. Right. It's kind of similar. Like they're not sharing data. So you don't have a cohesive unity of data. So
EMR has been around forever, but it still is like archaic as it was when it was proposed.
Yeah,
like,
super archaic.
So maybe there's a blockchain solution. Maybe there's something that can like share information better. It's really confusing to me.
Ideally, what I would like to see in the future is there's also testing too much creates like double negatives. It's not always good to test. There's way too many variables, right?
And testing can cause, X-rays themselves are damaging.
Yeah. And also there's stuff like white coat syndrome. Just the very act of seeing a doctor skews tests because you're just anxious and nervous. And so what I would like to see in the future, ideally, is my dream would be a Star Trek tech where we have in-home units. So saliva, urine, the whole 9 yards. Right? Let's say a unit like this.
Yeah.
Okay. That unit has my data. This is a node. It's not related to my name. Let's call me like I'm a number, like number 12 or number 10. And it's encrypted, whatever encryption we want to use, like P2P encryption or whatever. And as a node, it's connected to an oracle. And the oracle is taking other nodes' information. And we can have some form of machine learning within these oracles that are doing pattern recognition. So let's say I'm using this machine on a quarterly basis, like a full thing. It can be like, let's say it does a Dutch test, it does all these metabolites of hormones.
So like a panel.
Beyond a full comprehension. I mean like full hormonal panel, cortisol panel, everything. Like we'll look at like top markers that matters. Maybe like you can even do heart rate variability for that.
Sure. Your devices communicate with
exactly.
a centralized healthcare unit.
I have like an Oura ring that I wear. It shows my heart rate variability, my sleeping stuff. So we do this data aggregation.
Yeah.
And so basically, let's say I do it every quarter for like the big panel, but on like a daily basis, taking like small markers like heart rate variability, maybe my oxygen, etc. And then we have this oracle encrypted. I'm a number, but it's collecting a bigger reference sample pool of seeing patterns between other types of stuff. And let's say it sees something. It's preventative. I'm not looking for repair. Fuck repair medicine. I want preventative medicine. I don't want repair medicine. I don't want it before it's too late. I want early detection.
Yeah.
And so it sees something. It's like, oh, number 10 node, comes back to me. Ding, 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 ding. We see this.
Cortisol or whatever.
Yeah. And it doesn't tell you like, well, we got the fucking super protocol for you. What it does is we've located in this neighborhood practitioners.
So go pay attention.
And then this can become like lead generation for the practitioners to them. Because my wife's a doctor. I see it all the time, osmotically, just sitting there seeing what she has to do. It's like they spend a fucking lot of time just this test bullshit.
Yeah.
And they shouldn't.
Yeah.
They should be, doctors should be on the human side of things.
Ideally.
Tests should be for robots at the end of the day. People are bad at analyzing data. And now there are a lot of people who are, they might be out of business, like radiologists. Like you see they have machine learning for analyzing.
I had this conversation. So my wife's cousin, he's an ER doc.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. We're just out a couple of days ago and he had pitched a similar idea to one you just mentioned, which I should probably not mention publicly, but it was like similar thought pattern of like, hey, he sees just the amount of waste is really, really bothers him. And I think he's a smart guy. And he was thinking technology in a similar mechanism that you had described could solve some other problems that he sees on a regular basis that is just bad for everybody, that they're handled the way they're currently measured.
Yes.
So I think that the fact that you're in parallel thinking with someone who is a doctor now, sees people like in near-death situations on a daily basis, like, and I imagine your wife is like a family practitioner where she's not
GP,
seeing people like,
yeah.
you know, so this like convergent thinking is telling me that the technology is there. We're all pointing in the same direction. I think someone is going to crack it. I'm sure people are working on it. And so I could definitely set you up with him. He's a very entrepreneurial dude, and he has like ready solutions. He's like, I see this every single day and it drives me insane.
Well,
and this would be a way to solve
it. In the United States, they can do much better than we can over here. Unfortunately, in Canada, we have a high regulatory hurdle with our socialist healthcare system.
It's like worse than like the FDA, or like the MAD, or like the
couple of reasons.
medical
One, it's a small country. Two, it's like the amount of capital and regulatory mental punishment you have to go through. It's not really worth it for Canada. Like it's easier.
Not even as a pilot. Like it'd be like it's not worth piloting. You need somewhere that's like a little more permissive
and a little bit more private because it have to somehow fit within our system. It can't be totally private. Like right now, right now, there's very stringent laws of who's allowed to have access to your medical files.
There should be. I mean,
no, totally. But even you as an individual having access for them, for the longest time, this changed lately. It's really good that it changed. Like, for example, Life Labs is a popular lab over here.
Yeah.
You would have to walk in to your doctor or walk back to Life Labs to get your results.
You can't like get over the phone.
Phone, technically, it's not in the scope. Security reasons, phones aren't allowed. Even they still have fax days. Some fucking doctor's office will not use email. They use fax because it's considered more secure. I'm like, where do you get this shit from? I'm like,
maybe just a carrier pigeon would be the better way to do it, or like
I'm not kidding you. Fax, man. Fucking fax is insane. Okay. And so just recently, not too long ago, I was like, oh, thank you. Now I have email to receive my stuff. And so we're in the Stone Ages over here. And I think the only way that I see going back to using nature as an example, there's a great saying from whether his name was Gall, it's called Gall's Law, where no complex organism ever evolved from another complex organism. There is an evolutionary pathway where it's like simple organisms or a single cellular, then multicellular, then the cells get together, then it makes tissue and so forth and so forth. There's like a hierarchical level. It's not like, oh, boom, there we go. We got this thing, right? And this can be applied to anything. It's like, you can't just make a startup overnight and have $1 billion company. You know what I mean? There's a process, right?
Definitely.
And so we can't just come in and be like, healthcare system change. So ideally what would make sense where it's like, is there like a small town that we can run a pilot, as you mentioned?
I don't want to give away the secret sauce of this person because he works very hard on these things, but I would mention that there are foreign countries that have databases that are much more welcoming and permissive for these kinds of things.
Yeah.
For that crack, that would be so you have the software side and you have the hardware side.
Yes.
And then you have the regulatory side. Like, so we were just talking about this and thinking, how would you launch something that would be, let's just say, stick with your example of preventive medicine.
Yes.
Like, those are pretty difficult. I mean, just forget the regulatory for a second, forget the hardware, just the software of like machine. There's also a lot of hype around AI, and I think you know this, but I feel like whenever I hear that word,
too much hype. It's not AI to begin with.
I mean, it's funny. AI is what people have on slides when they're trying to pitch AI to somebody. Like even economists, we use regression all the time. That's in machine learning, but we don't like give it a sexy name. We just call it like ordinary least squares or panel data or time series. But like the public is like so enamored with this idea of AI, like it's loops or it's other.
I think
other
when you
functions.
sit down and tell people when people say AI today, so anyone listening, whenever anybody's saying AI today, probably 99.999% of the time it's machine learning. Okay, but what is that? The most algorithms that you see online or ML is literally just pattern recognition. That's all it is. It goes from filter 1 to filter 2 and down the line it goes, recognizing logic, recognizing patterns.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it doesn't have wisdom, but it has the ability to move large amounts of data that a human mind would not be able to look at. Like 20 million piece of data, like you have, put that on AWS and they can do that in like a split second. So I don't think AI is the penultimate solution. It is a tool. And going back to the radiologist thing, I asked him the same thing. I said, what about radiologists? Are they going to lose their jobs? He said, well, those that don't use technology are going to lose their jobs, which is true about anything. And so I think that we embrace technology versus trying to fight it. Like if it's better than human judgment, we should use it and be aware of its flaws, but we need to incorporate those things. I mean, but the thing is, that's just what people are like that. Whatever it is, they're resisting forward movement and whatever it is because they're afraid or they're suspicious or whatever. And once those grounds are addressed, then I think that there's potential for things to evolve. The regulatory side, I think that if something's like political suicide, it's not going to happen regardless of how good it is for the public.
I agree.
And all it takes is one screw up. I mean, look at what's happening with autonomous vehicles. Like, how many people have gotten killed by autonomous vehicles? Like, there was the one accident, I think it was in Texas. How many people get murdered every single day by people? Like, your benchmark for perfection.
Per year is 1 million. I think it's like 1 million people die a year of car accidents.
Our benchmark is inappropriate when we're looking at technology. People think 0 is the appropriate number of mistakes, but like, that's not the right number.
No.
The right number is what's the current best thing that the current system can do. And if we're doing 1,000 times better than that with AI or autonomous, then I just think it's hard for people to stomach because it's a very much a cognitive thing because they think that we're now responsible for someone's death, but you're responsible for it by not shifting to a better way of doing things. And that's the problem with,
Well, they don't look at it as a net utility. You look at like, is this a net plus utility or net negative utility? Like generally speaking, it's like if you look at like, okay, 1 million people a year die from car accident, human error, phones, this and that, right?
Drinking, whatever.
Daylight savings time, holy fuck.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Is there like a big blip? Is there like a big like jump during that?
There's a blip, yeah. When you lose, not gain.
We're all pretty tired, especially if you have a kid, which, you're like,
there's really a big blip for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Cardiovascular, like heart attacks too that day.
Really?
Yeah.
It was like, interesting.
It's insane.
Well, maybe that's a way to like keep the population down and then lower healthcare costs. It's just, kidding.
But
jeez.
We look at all these people dying, 1 million people, and you mentioned maybe like 1 or 2 die from self, and we're still in the early stages of self-driving. I'm like, it's a net utility win for everybody, self-driving. I still have some questions like the philosophical question of the train trolley question.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So anyone's listening, it's like, okay, you have a train. If you imagine a train on a track and the track is about to fork and is it 1 person versus 5 people?
It's usually like 1 to 3 usually.
Yeah, so it's 1 to 3 ratio. It's like, all right, but
3 people and like where it's going to fork.
So there's 3 people and let's say fork, the right fork and 1 person on the left fork. But you as an individual control the lever. So what do you do? Do you kill 1 person? Or do you just don't touch the lever and the track goes its original path and kills 3 people? For me, it's like, well, one way it's a self-driving car. I'm not the person deciding the lever. It's the software. The question, well, who programs the software? Well, it's the car manufacturer. Let's say Tesla in this case. Are they right? I don't know. I'm not a fucking philosopher. But like you saved 3 people's lives versus like, it's tough, man.
And those decisions are literally in the algo.
They are.
Like they decide, oh, you have a helmet. I'm going to kit you versus the other one that doesn't have. I mean, and that trolley car problem gets really interesting because there's another twist on that. And they actually have done, there's a lab in NYU, the Green Lab, where they would actually do this experiment. There's another twist on it. They would say, well, what if there was, and this is no offense to anybody, but they would say, what if there was a very overweight person on the bridge?
Oh, yeah.
And you could shove that person
and
stop the train. And there was something, so it's the same utility. So they took that and like, okay, you're still killing 1 instead of 3, but the notion of like pushing someone physically, like people couldn't do it.
They couldn't do it.
So some people would do, okay, I'll deliberately kill the 1 versus the 3, but to actually push somebody,
you doing it yourself.
There was something physical about that.
Yeah.
That was interesting. But yeah, it is hard for people to stomach, and Caltech did some interesting work on this. Even not about killing people, but money going to Africa or not. Like some people just like, so they could push a button and this paddle would hit this ball and it would go towards this other village. They're just like, they couldn't even touch it. It was so uncomfortable for them because they're like, we're not really going to do a trolley car and kill them, but like making the decision who lives or dies in the sense, but statistically, It was like people that would starve in Africa versus one village somewhere else, and they just couldn't even bear to make the decision of $50 going to save someone's life for food or medicine or something. So it's people, man. I mean, this whole show, I mean, the whole world, it's all about people. It's about the things that we're afraid of. It's the things that we're not optimized for. Like I was saying earlier, we are not optimized for the world we live in.
You know the biologist Owen E. Wilson?
Not to be confused with Owen Wilson.
The actor.
Wedding Crashers, obviously.
Great movie, by the way. He has to say, I always bring this up because his quote is fucking amazing. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technologies.
That's beautiful. I haven't heard that. That's really good.
And you're right. It's like we haven't fucking adapted. It's like it's pretty crazy.
Well, who's to say that we will? I mean, I don't know. I think the environment, I mean, it should kind of fold back onto providing us with an environment that we're better suited for. I mean, I know this might seem out of the blue, but the notion of communities and living and feeling like we belong to something is one of the healthiest things that a human or any mammal, maybe other animals need to, could experience. But like our current environment splinters us so dramatically that we make decisions based on my unit, which could be me or my family, your wife, your kids, whatever, which is different from my community.
Yes.
And the factors and the automatic reactions that would have been good for society get so split up because our tribes, I don't even know what our tribes are made up anymore. And so I don't know the future of the world. I mean, we are kind of getting into these bigger questions about what's going to happen with money and all of that. But our environment may never roll back in providing us with those tribes and communities and spaces where we make decisions they care about other people.
Unless we're conscious of that. And I see a trend happening.
Yeah.
Like I think
here in Toronto.
Everywhere in the world.
It's huge in California, but I don't find it as salient here. People aren't talking about that.
Depends on what community you're in.
That's
but
true.
I think
in my community, which is very tiny. I hardly have any friends here.
Not yet.
That's true. I'm like the new guy.
Yeah,
go to high school or college.
Exactly.
No one knows me.
And Toronto is not the most like.
I've noticed that. Not very like, hey, come over, have a drink. It's like, I don't know you, bro. They don't say bro. I know that, but
it's like stink face.
Stink face.
Yeah. And it's not the most friendliest. Not to say it's not friendly people. A lot of friendly people. It's just like not receptive.
It's true. The ones I have met though have been really great, but just strangers on the street kind of stuff. Like if you're sitting in a bar next to someone here, they probably won't talk to you. In the States, you're best friend by the end of that. You're like high-fiving the game. It's like,
to me, my best analogy of Toronto, we're all immigrants here doing our own thing, and we're like, fuck off.
There is a lot of that. But in New York, no one's from New York. Like the thing is, people I know who've lived there who are not from there.
Yeah.
They have a great community because people, you're from where? Okay, let's be friends. Like you're not from here either.
Yeah.
But the people that are the core here, like they do have a good community. Like I've been introduced to my wife's family, like they're really tight, and I love being part of that.
Yeah.
But getting in is, if you're a bit of an outsider, it's a bit difficult because the culture is I can't think of the right word off the top of my head. But
I don't think so.
Different
Toronto has a culture.
Really, you don't think it's a culture?
I don't think so. There's such a thing as a Toronto identity. It's not like.
How do you define culture?
Well, culture is the unification of many different individuals' morals and ethic values put together.
So I think the splintering makes it so fragmented that there's
I'm born and raised in Toronto. I'm around different communities in Toronto. Listen, Toronto is a super safe city.
Truth.
Like I said, it's not the most friendliest, but it's not dangerous. When people who are open are really fucking open. I think people are just here to just live a very like normal, like I want to say normal, but like a passive life. Is like it's safe. I have a job. There's opportunities. I put my head down. Fuck off.
Is that Canadian or is that Toronto?
No. What? I lived in BC for 5 years.
What are they like? Are they like more like?
Well, they don't like
Wild
Torontonians
West?
to begin with.
I've heard that.
First minute I moved in, I got a bad vibe because I'm from fucking Toronto.
I've noted I was there like before I moved here, and they would talk smack.
Smack, bro.
Smack.
So I lived in Kelowna, small town, interior BC. Beautiful. I actually had a hard time fitting in at the beginning because everyone's open because it's a small town. It's maybe like the area I lived, there was only 100,000 people.
That's a small town. I went to Healdsburg High School.
Yeah.
Healdsburg, California. 10,000 people
That's
in Healdsburg.
small.
So
but everyone said hi, right?
Everyone knows you and knows everything
so
about
Kelowna,
you.
like depending on where you live, I had a hard time of getting used to that.
There are people that know you. Here you can walk out, no one knows who the hell you are. I mean, maybe you're a celebrity here because,
No, but even then, like, go fuck off. But when I was living in BC, it took because the first couple of times, like people like smiling at me or waving at me, I'm like,
It's weird, huh?
it's weird. It took some time for me to adapt to that.
Now, like, did you then feel that it was genuine eventually?
I actually like to do a thing when I walk around Toronto. One of my meditations, I walk with noise cancellation headsets, and I just walk and I just smile at people, and I see how they react.
They probably think you're crazy.
Probably.
They're like,
But
he's
there's some
super
people
high.
that smile back.
Really?
Yes.
But the headphones would think that you're like smiling at something else. Like
They
you're,
would think that. But I just smile. They smile back.
Really?
Yeah, it's
you
interesting.
get a little bit once in a while.
Yeah.
I think the part of it is the weather is a big part of it.
Oh, for sure.
Like people it just makes you just close down and you want to get from where you're going as quickly as possible and you're just tunnel vision.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And it wasn't at all like that. Like I found like in California, when I went to grad school, I was like wearing a tank top every day, flip flops, and like strutting around happy. And here it's like we're like little ogres, like
But that's why
going
Toronto,
from one thing to the
in the
next. Like
summertime is crazy dope.
it is amazing. And people are more open. It's true.
Oh, yeah.
It's just even in the elevator, standing, like people are just like on their phones, trying to avoid making eye contact or talking to you.
Yeah.
People in my building or my office, and so it's like when I'm in an elevator, I do not put my phone. I'll
Yeah.
put it away, and I'll say hi, and I'll just
Yeah.
like. And sometimes people will like just shrink, and some people they'll be like, "Oh my God, you're saying something," and
But
they're like,
I
you
really-
got to be proactive and open that communication.
I really believe we're going to see a massive exodus of young families or people fed up with city life leaving. A couple of reasons why. From an economic standpoint, it's just not worth it. Like I mentioned earlier, the cost of living in Toronto, unless like as a family couple downtown Toronto, if you're not pulling in at least 150 together, it's like you're not getting by. Like regular condo rental, like a simple 2-bedroom condo, is like $3,000 depending on what neighborhood you're in.
Mhm.
That doesn't include utilities. That doesn't include anything else. Doesn't include all your other costs, like the base bone overhead cost of your living per month comes to like $6K.
Yeah.
Just basic. This isn't like, oh man, I'm living
Balling.
fucking good.
Yeah.
No, dude, you got a fucking shitty little 2-bedroom condo. And so for people, it's like the average medium of income for men, I don't know, women across all provinces and territories in Canada across all different trades is like about 40, 45K. The total medium.
The median for it.
For everything, all territories, all provinces, all trades, roughly
right.
45K. And so 45K to live in downtown Toronto, it's not going to happen.
But they're not here. I mean, they're
There's a-
getting pushed out and they have to commute if they work here. It's
I think
brutal.
the whole idea, the only reason, there's two reasons why people live in a metropolitan. Number one, they're young, they like the lifestyle. Listen, I used to fucking be in the club industry, party hard, crazy. Like, I get it.
I can tell. You're a partier.
Yeah, was.
Yeah. You got that.
I've retired.
You've retired.
from
You've
partying.
hung up your rave
Yeah.
hat.
I've partied for 10 lifetimes.
Wow. I was a total nerd.
Were ya?
I was like,
I never
a
went to high
math
school.
major.
I got kicked out of high school when I was in grade 9. I was hustling. I made a shit ton of money cash. I was in a club scene like crazy.
oh,
Yeah. Like party.
now you tell me
Now I tell you. It's a little
Man.
bit too late now, you know?
things I would ask you.
Yeah.
At the time.
And so when I view it as like work is changing, a lot of work is becoming more and more remote. A lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like even for my company, we're all remote. All of us, all different sections of our company is remote. My buddy has one of the world's biggest software conferences, QCon, InfoQ.
Mm-hmm.
Floyd, pretty much 90% of his company is remote. He has like more than like 80 employees all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
It works. Different countries too, not just Canada. And so for me, it's like I think people will come to terms where it's like, why should I kill myself to live in Toronto
Mm-hmm.
when I can go live in wherever?
Where? So what's your opportunity?
Let's say in Ontario, you want to go live in Aurelia or Barrie.
But of the people that you
Yeah.
said who could work remotely, they generally have hard skills. Or are you saying this is people like someone who doesn't necessarily have like advanced education? Like who are these people that have the option?
Forget education. If you look at any corporation or enterprise and you walk in, 99% of all the jobs is on the computer.
Mhm.
Why can't you do that job from home? It's cheaper for the companies too.
There's that evolution certainly.
They don't need insurance. They don't need the overhead cost, right?
The physical space.
Physical space. They can be like,
There's a commercial real estate issue with that because that's happening. That's
right?
true.
You can come in only once a week for a company meeting, just
Mm-hmm.
for like 2-3 hours.
But okay, that's true. But still, housing is still under extraordinarily high demand. People are getting above bidding still, whether it's apartments, condos.
In Toronto,
Yeah.
But you can go like say Aurelia, or you can go to Burlington. You can find beautiful properties within your price range, and it's not just the cost of property; it's the quality of your lifestyle too. Like I own a cottage in just north of Wasaga.
Mm-hmm.
I can see my private beach like right there. I can skip to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a couple of acres I own.
Mm-hmm.
Like quality, like okay, even better example. Kelowna, I lived years. I'll fucking even show. I lived on a private beach in a fucking resort area. Actually, I'll show you on here. And I can't remember if I was ever stressed. It's the quality of living where it's
We
like,
should have taken your cortisol levels before and after.
bro, my cortisol levels right now are fucking high, bro. 4-point cortisol test.
I believe it. You could do different types of.
Let me show you. Oh, here we go. Here's a good view. I lived in these like townhouses, man. I had my private beach. There's Mount Knox over here. I went hiking every weekend.
Oh, that's like, almost as cool as being able to walk down Bloor Street.
One thing bad about Toronto, they really designed it bad. It's like no like, what's it called? Like
this is depressing, dude. You're depressing me right now. I know this is beautiful. I've been there. I used to live in nature. I have not had a moment of like being I'm part hippie, let's face it.
Yeah.
To like be at one with nature is really important for your like emotional well-being. The closest thing I get is swimming in a chlorinated pool. Is like because there's something about your mind moving quickly. Like your imagination can span the universe, but like your body, something about putting your body in sync with nature. Like when you swim, you can't move any faster than your ability to swim through. And I find that there's something very spiritual about that, because whatever the panic or anxiety you feel, especially in the city, something about going through a medium like that makes you be here right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a lot of things we obsess about. I mean, yeah, we live in an apartment. We have a baby. It's very loud.
Mm-hmm.
She's very loud. She's wonderful. She just screams. She's a baby. And like we're constantly thinking, how do we get out of this? And so even on a professor's salary, which, in the business school is not bad. And my wife was working for a family business. You'd probably find it interesting, skincare. But like the amount we'd have to make to outbid somebody on a house that'd be good enough for even one or two kids, it's pretty significant. The thought of paying $8,000 or $10,000 in just living expenses is like not that sexy.
No.
And so the thought is, so we have a choice. Like you said, we can move out of town. I mean, I now work, right downtown, so it'd be a heck of a commute. I'm giving up my life to get to work.
Mm-hmm.
Or we fight harder and make more money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are like major life decisions that affect your quality of life. So we talk about this constantly, and it is something I think that vexes lots of people, and it's not unique to Toronto. I mean, my mom lives in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I have friends that, that.
Oh, their rent up there is insane.
And friends in New York and Tel Aviv, and like the whole world is going through this. And so go back to your original question, not to be like a end of days kind of person, but like something's got to give. And I think that I would love to have the time to pay attention to those like stress fractures and to see what's going on. And I mean, at the moment, I'm not jumping at opportunities. I'm sitting on, more cash than I would had I not been thinking
smart.
about
If you
those
look
things.
at most people, they're sitting on the cash. Like Apple, Amazon, everyone's sitting on cash.
So I can't see the future, but I would feel better when I have a long track record of cash flows, and to know that if there's a disturbance or perturbation of that cash flow, that there's not going to be a fire sale going on. So I've just become very conservative. Working in finance for this long has changed me. I was much more of I was a bit less conservative, but now I just think we all need to think in terms of long-term responsibility, and it's not a sexy thing.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting, I have students like that went to Ivey Business School, got great jobs, making around six figures or more, living at home, and knowing they're missing out on the club scene, knowing they're not have access to the social stuff. But like, I actually have a lot of respect for that. They say, look, they are forecasting this at 21, 22, that there's no way I'm buying a house, and I'm okay to eat some humble pie and have my mom do my laundry.
Also, the question:
sometimes.
why do you have to buy a house? I advise all young couples, and it's like I'm old, I'm not, but I'm only 34. But people who are thinking of buying a house, and situation does matter.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can financially afford it, like buffer wise.
If you're loaded,
yeah, fine.
If your parents are going to put down $1 million a down payment, sure, go for it.
Whatever, context does matter.
Yeah.
But if you're struggling to get that 20%, let's say average house in Toronto is $1 million. That means $200,000, and your stress, you look at total expenses of all overhead, not just your mortgage, everything that you have, and you realize your buffer is $200. You must be a fucking lunatic to say yes to that.
And are you maxing out your RSPs? Like,
And then
are you thinking long term? It's very brittle.
Forget RSP. God forbid you or your partner loses your job or gets sick or gets hurt and you lose one income. What then? What are you going to do? Nothing. You're fucked.
Yeah. That you can't, the money is illiquid. Like there's no, you can't take it out of the house.
Like a pure, like I'm viewing it as like risk to reward ratio, sitting on the sidelines. I'm like, this is a horrible deal. Like there's no benefits in this deal.
I think it's partly a FOMO part. Like you're talking about this notion, just people, they're saying, well, it's $1 million now. At this rate, it'll be $1 million. It'll be 1.2 next year.
Yeah, but there's nothing wrong with investing in real estate, but go at it as a real estate investor. Go invest in a duplex. You know, my dad retired pretty early over here. He came in, immigrant mentality, construction worker, etc. He bought a bunch of duplexes and triplexes. We lived on the top, I remember, and he rented out the bottom, and that's how he retired. And I tell people, I'm like, I'm not telling you don't go to real estate. That's not the question. I'm just saying if you really believe this investment, it's not. You are the liable party at hand. Everything's on you. You can take that money and put it to work. So let's say you get a duplex. You live on the top. You rent the bottom. You got a person paying your mortgage.
Or the basement, but you know.
Sure, whatever, right? So like
nice,
this is kind of, it's a psychological switch.
Right, but I've been looking at those, and they're also quite expensive. I mean,
duplexes in Toronto?
Forget about it.
2.5 going up for sure. Oh, yeah. Like you got to put down $400,000. Oh, yeah. Kitchener, Waterloo.
Yeah.
London, all the university students. Guaranteed paychecks from the government.
I have a place in London. I when I was working at Ivey, I bought like a 3-story townhouse.
Yeah.
It was $333,000. Here it would sell for, it's gorgeous. It would sell for like 1.5 here. So I thought of just like carving it off, just shipping it here and just plopping it in the backyard. Sure. Do you have a backyard? I could just like drop it into. Is that cool? Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's the only way, I think.
All right. I think we covered a lot.
Man, we have spanned like
everything, man.
Yeah.
Billions
of years in like current modern reality, the things we struggle with, our hormones, our finances.
They're all related.
In the future.
All related.
Smiling at people.
Okay. I know we covered a lot. I know a lot of my audience will have a shit ton of questions, and definitely they're going to be interested in the research. And everything we talked about is on the site. I will leave it in show notes. But if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best resource for them?
Pretty private with my email, but I have
website,
I have like just put it my phone number.
Yeah.
I think you can reach me right through YouTube.
Okay.
Can't you? I have like an account there.
Okay. I'll put your website in the show notes too. Oh, so everyone can see it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just my name.
Yeah.
I'm happy to certainly any science questions or life questions or whatever. I may need to update some of those pictures. Yeah. I don't look. That was like my triathlon.
But you have all the reference. I'm on your site right now. If you guys are interested for all the studies that we talked about, it's on the site. Like everything from the stock market testing to the cognitive reflection test to the bling bling status test. It's all there on the recent publications, so you can see it and actually go through the literature and the research yourself, which I do recommend. But yeah, highly recommend. Go check it out.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Got it.
Yeah.